Cloud? Thank you. And then another couple of things. If you have any questions, just please put them on the chat. If there's something that need immediate attention, I'll just stop Sarah and ask her. If not, we'll wait until the end. And also at the end of the presentation of Sarah's presentation, there'll be time for a Q&A. So feel free to unmute yourselves and ask her whatever it is that you have in mind. And with further ado, let's welcome Sarah. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Hi, thank you, Bea. My name is Sarah Mclaughlin, and I am a massage therapist, but I am also a forest therapy guide. And I'm just here today to let you know a little bit about forest therapy. And if you have any questions, please feel free, like Bea said, to just put them in the chat. All right, so let's get started by talking a little bit about what we think forest therapy is. Whenever we hear the name forest therapy, it, for me anyway, conjures up ideas of something that's therapeutic and in nature, especially in the woods. And when we think about a forest, it really is, the technical definition of it is land dominated by trees. So we hear a lot of nature walks, these kinds of things, ecotherapy, they all basically mean the same thing. But anytime you see a forest therapy or forest bathing workshop, it will most likely absolutely take place in the woods and not just on a nature walk or a hike through an open field or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And does anybody have any questions or any sort of like preconceived notions that they want dispelled or confirmed through this talk? No? Okay. All right. Let me figure out how to share my screen because I had it and now I'm like, oh, share screen. All right. Okay. So.
Looking good.
Okay, good. I'm so glad. I put up this quote I really love by the poet Lord Byron. There is a pleasure in the pathless woods. And that really speaks to the fact that in forest therapy, there is no end goal in mind. So oftentimes, especially in our North American culture, we have a tendency to do things with a specific goal or purpose. And it can be helpful to think of forest therapy more as a practice of letting go in a way, where we can go to the woods, we can meander without any sort of specific purpose in mind or destination. So it's not exercise, it's not getting your heart rate up or cardiovascular work, and it's not meant to be a practice that's done in order to get you to a specific physical location. It is strictly a meditative practice that brings you more into the present moment and in relationship to nature. Oh, by the way, I don't think I mentioned my pronouns are she, her. So there are many names to forest therapy, and you'll see them throughout. If you look up on Dabble, or I'll share resources later about where to find forest therapy walks. On Dabble, the Cook County Forest Preserve website, Morton Arboretum, these kinds of places, they'll use different names. They all basically mean the same thing. We tend to call it forest therapy, but the word therapy sometimes, not that it has a negative connotation, but it makes people think a little bit more of like a medicinal practice. So places like Morton and Botanic Gardens have kind of gotten away from using the word therapy. So instead they'll use forest bathing or forest walk because it's a little bit less formal, a little bit less medicinal sounding. The technical name of it, if you look on the very first little star there, is called Shinrin Yoku. And that is a Japanese, where it is from the Japanese culture. It means literally forest bathing. And the Japanese are certainly not the first culture to utilize the forest for purposes of relaxation and mental health and clarity, but they are, sorry, I just see a little spider is just like crawling up my computer. Hold on. There you go, little buddy. I don't want to hurt him. Okay. But anyway, so the Japanese were the first to develop this term and to sort of codify what they believe forest therapy to be. Many cultures throughout time immemorials, from the time that humans and forests first existed together, have utilized the forest for peace and calming of mind. But the Japanese in the 1980s decided to develop forest bathing as an actual therapeutic practice with actual structure to it, because the tech boom was starting to happen in the 80s in Japan. And the Ministry of Health noticed the perceived negative effects that so much technology was having on their citizens. The workforce was working longer hours. Culturally speaking, the Japanese work ethic is can be, not always, but can be very strict and very long hours, a lot of dedication to your work. So a lot of people were spending a lot of time, for the first time in history, with computers and different technological features. And the Ministry of Health was, this spider is so funny. Okay, buddy, we're gonna move. Okay. The Ministry of Health was really concerned because a lot of people started noticing an uptick in depression, in particular in the Japanese culture. And just gonna move you. Okay. I wish you guys could see this spider. It's like, he knows we're talking about like forest things. He wants to come join us. So anyway, so they developed Shirin Yoku, forest bathing, as a way to solve two problems. One, the technological boom in their mind was creating this sort of general malaise and depression that was very pervasive in particularly the young workers that were having to work all these long hours with technology. And two, there was a lot of urban development suddenly, right? So there was a lot of, uptick with technology, and then cities started sprouting up all over the place. And there was a real loss of native forest land. So they wanted to both treat sort of this general mental health issue they were seeing, and at the same time promote interest and involvement with their native forest land and try to save it. So in the 1980s, they developed the term Shirin Yoku, and they started along the Ministry of Health, along with the Forestry Commission, became intertwined. So now in Japan, and in fact, a lot of Asian countries, if you want to urbanize an area or start building large high-rise condos, et cetera, you have to actually show that you're going to maintain a certain amount of nature within the area, because they consider it such an important part of community mental health, that those two things are intertwined. You have to prove that it will not be detrimental to mental health. So Shirin Yoku was developed for those two reasons. And then in the United States, though, you won't see that term used as often, but you will see things like forest bathing. Nature therapy and ecotherapy are newer terms. And ecotherapy in particular is utilized by the psychiatrists and psychological community. Those therapists are starting to recognize, again, what the Japanese culture has already recognized, which is mental health and connection to nature can be quite intertwined. So nature and ecotherapy may not directly be in a forest. It may be like in a field or with plants or something like that, but sometimes they can be used interchangeably. All right, so this is the technical definition of forest therapy. So it's really any meditative practice that you can utilize in a woodland or a natural setting to enhance your experience of the present moment. And we can go through what some of those meditative practices are. generally speaking, most forest therapy sessions will be a group session. It's just easier for and more cost effective for places like Morton Arboretum or Chicago Botanic Garden to lead a group of somewhere between 10 to 14 individuals. But there's nothing to prevent you from doing forest therapy on your own. And unless you need to have someone with you or something like that, it is not an activity that has to be done in a group. So some of the benefits, and there's been a lot of studies done on this, particularly, of course, in Japan, where this began, that suggests, actually more than suggests, that confirm. You can even look at the studies that are on, I always forget the website that lists the different studies. I don't remember it. I'll find out. But anyway, there are various studies that show the number one thing is decreased blood pressure across the board, and it has a sustainable effect. So it's not something where you go into the forest and then you have a temporary drop in blood pressure. If you develop a practice where you're going once or twice a week, etc., it has the same effect as taking pills or medicine on the majority of the population that participated in these studies. So, of course, talk to your doctor, et cetera, and make sure it's something that's right for you and that you can decrease blood medication safely. But if you do want to develop a forest therapy practice and you have high blood pressure issues, it would be very beneficial. And you can also track your blood pressure over time. So if you do have high blood pressure, you probably have a home cuff or something. You can just start tracking it and see if it makes a difference. That is the number one benefit. It also has shown to improve autonomic nervous system function. And what that means is your digestion is autonomic, right? So if for any reason you're stressed and there's a hormone called cortisol that's produced when you're super stressed, cortisol inhibits your digestive function. It prohibits the natural and automatic movement of your nervous system that moves your food along your digestive tract. So through promoting any kind of relaxation, quite honestly, but particularly forest therapy has shown to have an improvement on digestive function and autonomic nervous system function. So breath rate, that kind of thing that we're not necessarily in control of just by our own mental faculties, has a very good benefit on improvement of immune function. And that is also most likely tied to the autonomic nervous system function as well, because they are intertwined. If you're super high stressed, we all know our immune system reacts and responds. If you had chickenpox like I did as a kid, you probably, if you're of a certain age, probably got shingles vaccine. The reason that shingles comes back is because our immune system at some point tanks. We get really stressed out, something happens, and that virus shows itself, right? So improving, and I have a typo there, improvement of immune function is always a good thing. And then the second largest studies, well, the second most important studies I think that are being done, blood pressure for sure, but it's also showing a marked improvement for folks experiencing depression. So the symptoms of depression seem to really be alleviated by a consistent forest therapy practice. And that has been shown through multiple studies, and it's the most going to be, I think, the center of studies going forward for this, because depression is such an issue in world over. And then general improvement of mental health, of course, through all those things. So how do you start your own forest therapy practice? It doesn't take a lot, but it does take a few adjustments to what we're used to from our daily life and our daily habits. Most of us are not used to ever turning off our cell phones or our electronic devices. I'm very lucky that I'm of I think the last generation that grew up without all of that stuff. And so I know what it's like to not have it on. But, if you're 19 or 20 years old and you're listening to this, you may not. I have some younger friends who can't remember not having a cell phone, right? So the very first thing I would say is, of course, take your cell phone with you just to be on the safe side when you're out and about running around the woods, but turn it off. Turn off any cameras or electronic equipment. Again, there's no goal. There's no end goal with this, which I think is hard for people to grasp sometimes. So it's not about going out in nature and taking a bunch of cool pictures, or like tracking yourself on a map to see how far you've gotten, or putting your Fitbit, syncing up or whatever. Just if you can, if it's okay, if you need to work up to it, I get it. But it's very beneficial to turn off the electronics. Again, wander without purpose. Be aware of your terrain as it changes, especially if you have physical limitations about whether or not you can climb certain heights, or if there's too many roots or something in the path. Of course, be aware of that and turn around if you need to. But there's no goal in mind. Again, I just want to really hit that home. Minimize talking if you're with a friend or a group. It's not, if you're going to go out for forest therapy, you guys can always go out for a margarita or cup of tea or whatever afterwards. That's great. And discuss what you experienced. But while you're on the trail, if you are with another human being, it's a nice time, and it can be a little awkward if you're not used to it, but it can be a nice time to just be silent and enjoy the moment. The main practices for forest bathing all include your senses. So pick one at a time. That's the easiest way to start. And the easiest one, if you do not have a hearing impairment, if you can hear easily, is hearing, because there are so many little sounds in the forest. So whether you're sitting or walking, if you find a nice cozy spot to sit, please do. And just notice all the different sounds you hear in a forest. The trees, in the wind, if it's summertime and the leaves are moving, if there are leaves. As well as like birds are so noisy this time of year, but it's so great. If there's a water source nearby. And also too, I just want to mention, like, we're in an urban environment. So if you are out at Harms Woods or any of the forest preserves in Cook County, you're going to hear traffic. That's just going to happen. I am from way down south, and I remember when I first moved here, it drove me a little batty that I couldn't get away from car and airplane noise ever. So instead of letting it drive you crazy, which I get, try to welcome that sound in, just acknowledge it. And that, that way it doesn't cause you any stress. It's not another source of anxiety. It's just going to be there. But see if you can, like, underneath that, notice other sounds. And if you're hearing impaired, or if hearing is not a strong sense that you have, then choose a different one. But just to start out with, just choose one at a time. For seeing, if you are not seeing impaired, make sure that you notice all the small things that are happening. In the fall, the leaves blowing or the tree branches moving. Maybe you'll notice like a little mouse or something if you're really slow and quiet, keeping a slow pace. Again, we're not trying to get our cardiovascular exercise doing forest bathing. So moving slowly. Touching. We'll talk a little bit more about safety and what to touch, what not to touch, etc. But touch is really great sensation. I'm a massage therapist by occupation, so for me, it's a very important thing to experience. But not a lot of us are super. We don't spend a lot of time touching, different textures and that kind of thing. So we will talk about plants that are unsafe to touch in our region, but basically go up and touch tree bark, please. Feel if there's like a fallen leaf, like feel the consistency of the leaf or the mulch. And then tasting. Again, tasting is one to be a little bit cautious with, but if you're familiar with your surroundings and you know your plants, and I emphasize, please know your plants. If you know that there is not pesticide being sprayed where you're at, and there's a blackberry bush, and you know they're blackberries, please taste them. I think a lot of us have a lot of fear surrounding that. We don't engage with the natural world very much. But if you're aware and you have knowledge surrounding it, it's okay. You can even plant some mint in your tea garden or your little garden, and take some mint tea with you. Or if you're walking and you know what bee balm looks like, bee balm makes a great tea. These are all like little things you can do. And if you're uncomfortable doing it in the wild, totally understandable. You can grow a little hydroponic tea garden for your own at home and try it out. That way you know exactly what you're ingesting. So I just want to give you a little caution surrounding that one. Another practice you can do is acknowledging the 4 directions. This is a practice that has been started to be incorporated more in forest bathing therapeutics. It is technically a Native American tradition. And it's very simple to do. You can make it as simple or as complicated as you want, but basically start by facing a direction that you know is east or north. And just, if you're comfortable closing your eyes, you can close your eyes and just visualize everything you know is north, right? Like the snow, the tundra, like ice, polar bears, like whatever it is. And then open your eyes and turn to the other direction. And just, you can even say it out loud, you know. You can thank nature and the earth for providing whatever is in that direction. And lastly, just find a spot to sit. You know, if you don't want to walk, or if you don't feel comfortable walking, you can incorporate all of this by sitting. There's nothing that you're going to lose by doing that. Considerations. So this is just some basic things, but you may not know about some of these things if you don't go out into the woods on a regular basis. You want to make sure you have proper shoes and clothing. And what that basically means for shoes, make sure they're comfortable, but closed-toed is very, very good. Tennis shoes are great as long as you have a dry ground you're working with, or a paved ground. If you're going to go into things that are muddy, or there's lots of roots, lots of hills, that kind of thing, you might want to take a look at hiking boots or upgrading to something that's a little hardier than a tennis shoe. But tennis shoes, probably for about, I'd say, 90% of the hiking that is available in this area, are completely fine. Clothing, I personally am very fair skinned, and so I'm very sensitive to sun exposure. So I always wear, for me, even if it's really hot, I'll wear a lightweight hiking shirt. If you can afford a merino wool shirt, they're quite light and they wick moisture. And I always think that going to Goodwill or something and like going through their athletic department, you can definitely find some clothing that's very suitable for a very good price. Make sure you wear socks that cover a bit of your ankle. And that's just because if you're moving through the area, you don't want to snag your ankle on anything. You'd rather have some cloth in between yourself and a tree branch or a tree root, for example. Sun protection for sure. If you're someone that wears sunscreen, great. If you're not, fine. You may want to throw a hat on just to keep the sun off your face. If it's summertime, you may not need it if there's enough tree coverage and leaf coverage that's blocking the sun. And any sort of critter repellent. There's many different kinds. There is one called Picardian, which is developed from a pepper, a kind of pepper actually, that doesn't irritate the skin, but ticks and mosquitoes absolutely hate it, and it doesn't smell like anything. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's less terrible for the environment than DEET, and is actually much more mild for your body. Terrain. Just be aware of your terrain. Most places now you can look up on a website. Cook County has a very extensive website, and they will grade the trail based on difficulty, and they'll tell you whether or not it's paved. So if you need a paved trail, great, you can look it up on the Cook County website. If you need something if you want something that's a little bit more challenging, you can go to the 3 or 4 level. If you need something that's very easy to walk, look for a 1 or 2, and that's how they grade them. Weather, just be aware. If you're going to go out in rain, wear a raincoat. I always say, like, every time I lead a forest therapy walk, like, it's rain or shine. So make sure you wear a rain jacket if you need one, etc. And then know your plants if you're going to touch them. And these are our plants that we most likely do not want to touch. Some people do not have a reaction to these plants. I do. So if you see 3 leaves, let it be. The poison ivy and poison oak have 3 very distinctive leaves. Poison sumac's a little bit less, but it's also pretty easy to recognize. So this is poison ivy, and poison ivy can come in many different forms. It can come as a single plant. It looks like a little bush sometimes. This one is a vine. So just when you see those 3 leaves, that's one you don't need to experience the tactile sensation of. Just skip that. And you'll see that poison oak looks similar, but the leaves look a little bit more like oak leaves. And sumac, you'll see, it's not a great picture, but down here there's like some berries at the bottom and a red stem. That's the most distinctive feature, is that red stem. So just avoid those guys. Here's some resources for you, and I'm gonna send an email to Bea with all this information. So you can either screenshot this, or I'm just gonna send her an email and she can forward it to you. Morton Arboretum and Chicago Botanic Gardens regularly run forest therapy walks that are 2 to 3 hours in length, and they're quite easy to walk. They don't take you over a lot of rough terrain. If you're interested in studying this, you can study it on your own. There is no legal licensure for it. But if you want to go do some formal study, the Association of Forest and Nature Therapy Guides is the most popular. And then, of course, the Forest Preserves of Cook County. I included some books as well that the library does have. I won't go through all of them, but there's some Japanese ones in there. Braiding Sweetgrass is by a Native woman who's also a botanist. So you can get a little bit different perspective on it. And I always love Stephen Hared Booner because he is kind of esoteric and off the wall, but just a lot of fun to read. Lastly, if you want to join me, I'm going to have a small forest therapy walk on Tuesday, June 14th out at Harms Woods. It's a very easy walk. There's nothing particularly physically challenging about it. And that's my email address. And again, I will include that information to Bea. And the last thing before we do a little Q&A is I just want to share this beautiful poem with you from Mary Oliver, who's a great nature poet, was a great nature poet. Ordinarily, I go to the woods alone. Except I'm going to read it to you because I've like lost my cursor. I can't read it myself. Ordinarily, I go to the woods alone with not a single friend, for they are all smilers and talkers and therefore unsuitable. I don't really want to be witnessed talking to the catbirds or hugging the old black oak tree. I have my own way of praying, as you no doubt have yours. Besides, when I am alone, I can become invisible. I can sit on the top of the dune as motionless as an uprise of weeds until the foxes run by unconcerned. I can hear the almost unhearable sound of the roses singing. If you have ever gone to the woods with me, I must love you very much. And that's forest bathing.
I love that poem. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, guys.
I just put your email on the chat. I will send the resources that you will share with me. I will also send the presentation, the YouTube link. And now if anybody has any questions, feel free to either put them on the chat or unmute yourselves, whatever you want.
I had probably a comment.
Yeah.
I go to Botanic Gardens on a regular basis, and as you said, Sarah, there's always noise in the background. I don't think there's a spot in Botanic Garden where you can't hear the Edens, no matter where you sit. Because the same thing, I will sit in a nice calm spot with you, and it is calm. You just have to block it out. But yeah, there's always that other sound, that underlying sound.
Yeah, it's a lot here, isn't it? Especially I find air traffic and highway sound to be very
right. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. It's true.
This is Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, and I wonder, have you ever found a place where you couldn't hear traffic? Because I crave that.
Yeah, so it's difficult, but there's 2 spots. One is at Morton Arboretum in the, I think it's either the spruce grove or the cedar grove. I can't remember which one it is. If you stand in the middle of it, you almost can't hear any sound outside of it, which is really nice.
Wow.
It's a bit of a trek to Morton, but I go just because that is worth it to me.
Yeah.
And then anything else local, let's see. Sometimes, not always. Again, it depends on the time of year. Summertime is better because the leaves block more sound. But there is a spot deep in by Bullfrog Lake. I think it's in Palatine.
Oh.
Where if you stand in the middle of like the really heavily wooded section there, most of the time you can't hear the traffic. But it is very challenging. You almost have to go an hour north or an hour south.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seems
This
like-
is Linda.
I'm
I'm sorry. This is Linda again too. You know where else do we've gone to? Anderson Japanese Gardens in Rockford.
Oh,
And that's pretty quiet. You know, there's a lot of nice spots to
I
just sit
haven't
and
been there.
contemplate. Yeah, it actually is very pretty, very beautiful, you know, and it's nice and quiet right around. There's no big highway close
Yeah.
by. So it's pretty nice.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
tough. It's tough in this immediate area. Like
Yeah.
yeah. Japanese garden in Rockford. Okay, cool.
I was also thinking that it must depend on the wind direction too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure it does. It's just, and everything, it also depends on even temperature, because I don't know the exact science of it, but when it is colder out, sound travels more. I don't know how that works, but again, summertime is the best time to try to find a quiet spot. But yeah, it is very challenging here. The best one I have found within a 45-minute radius is that spruce. I can't remember if it's spruce or cedar grove inside Morton Arboretum. Yeah.
I have a question. Is listening to music like a sacrilege for forest therapy?
You can do whatever you want. No, I don't. I mean, I don't think it's a sacrilege, because I don't think that it's I think listening to music is great. I just think that defining what your purpose is going into it is important. So if you just want to go and maybe you just want to do like a sight meditation where you just sit and listen to music and notice all the sight things that you can see, and that's totally great. I would caution anybody, if you're in a wooded area, especially in an urban wooded area, that listening to music could not be the safest thing if you're having to cross roads, or if there's lots of joggers on the path and you can't hear them approach, like you want to get out of their way, etc. But no, I think that if you want to sit and listen to music, then rock and roll.
I missed what your alternatives to DEET are, or insect repellent.
Oh yeah,
Say that
Picardian.
again.
Yeah, it's called Picardian.
How do you spell
And
that?
yeah, I don't know if I can spell it. That's a great question. It's PICAR at the end.
Okay.
If you just Google, if you relatively spell it sort of correctly, it should pop up. It's available at REI,
Okay.
and any other like Uncle Dan's, that kind of thing should have it. It doesn't have any scent. It comes in like a lotion, etc., that you can just put like around like where your shirt and your pants lines are.
Yeah.
It's quite nice in terms of it's not irritating like DEET can be. It doesn't smell like anything, and ticks and mosquitoes hate it. And ticks don't really seem to care too much about DEET. So, I'd rather keep the ticks off than other bugs for my own health purposes. But it's called Picardian, and it's a little bit pricier, maybe like $10 to $14 for a smaller bottle of it, but you don't need very much of it, and it lasts quite a long time.
Great. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Yeah.
You mentioned,
It might have, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, please.
I think you might have already mentioned in the presentation, but if we're interested in the Harms Woods event, is there a sign up or do we email?
Yeah, totally. So you can send me an email and Bea will, she put it in the chat, but she can also send it out through with a resource list I'm going to give her. You can just shoot me an email and I'll have like a little online sign up through, I don't remember what I use, Eventbrite. I think you can just sign up because I like to limit it to 10 people, just so I can keep track of everyone. Anything more than that and it starts to get a little bit too large, I think. Yeah.
When you do, Sarah, when you do the forest walks, do you, I know you said people, you're not supposed to talk, but do you guide them in any way? How do
Yeah,
you do that?
totally. It's yeah, we do. And we discuss a little bit on the group forest walks. It depends, you know, if you're just going out with a friend, I think that of course like some talk is absolutely fine. I guess the only thing I was saying is like it's easy with a friend to sort of get caught up into conversation that might take you places where you're not noticing the sensorial experience. But for sure, we chat, you know, I pose questions and if you want to like talk about it as we walk or that kind of thing, there's definitely time to talk on my forest therapy walks for sure. Yeah.
You also mentioned some, I'm sorry, I have like some questions that pop
Okay,
up.
go for it.
You also mentioned when you mentioned the definition of forest therapy, the different types of meditation or what type. So can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of different things that you yourself can do that can become a meditative practice and that you'll experience on most forest therapy walks. And there are things like, you know, go to the dollar store and get yourself a little magnifying glass. And if you want to like sort of engage the sight sense, you can go around and take your magnifying glass and take a look at plant leaves or buds that are coming out. If there's little insects that you kind of want to see a little bit closer or the bark of a tree, that's a great practice. And it's very easy to sort of spend a lot of time in that. Other things you can do is I like to go to the paint store and get a big, like all the different colors of like green or brown. And then you can walk around if you want and pick up leaves or various things that sort of like match the color. Like trying to match the different colors is kind of fun. It's a way of connecting into you know, just color in general that we oftentimes just take for granted that it's just all a big wash, but you can kind of start to single out different greens or different browns. There's a lot of different practices like that. Sitting and meditating under a tree, just even putting your hand on a tree and feeling the texture in the bark, and closing your eyes and just feeling that sensation under your hand. Those can all be meditative practices. There's a very long list of them.
Anybody else has any more questions? If not, I will send as soon as the presentation is on our YouTube channel, I will send the resources Sarah mentioned, as well as any other things, Sarah, that you can think of that maybe
Sure.
people might enjoy. Also, your contact information, the date for your forest walk. And as Sarah mentioned, those books that you will find are available in our library or part of the consortium. So I think that's about it. And Jan says, in every wood, in every spring, there is a different green, Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thank you, Sarah. I learned a lot. I appreciate your delicate, the way you speak of things in such a delicate way and nuanced way that you made me kind of like want to go on a forest walk. I hope everybody enjoyed it too. And if you have any questions for Sarah that you forgot about, you can either email me or wait till I send you her information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bea.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you. You want to hang out, Sarah, just a second?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.